I rise to commemorate the 75th anniversary of the attack on Pearl Harbor. For the people of Hawaii, it started as an ordinary, sunny Sunday morning in December. Families were getting ready for church. Others were preparing breakfast. It was quiet. It was peaceful. Just before 8 a.m., the first wave of Japanese warplanes started their coordinated surprise attack on the island of Oahu. Bombers attacked aircraft clustered wingtip to wingtip at Wheeler and Hickam airfields, making it too easy for Japanese pilots to destroy their targets. By the end of the attack, Japanese forces had sunk 4 of the 8 battleships at Ford Island. Another battleship intentionally ran aground in the harbor to avoid blocking the channel. 3 destroyers and 7 other ships were sunk or severely damaged. It was the worst disaster in U.S. naval history. 2,403 service members were killed or mortally wounded. 1,247 service members were injured, and 57 civilians were killed. Across Oahu, people watched as smoke and fire blackened the sky over Pearl Harbor. Among those were 2 17-year-olds, Daniel K. Inouye and Daniel K. Akaka. Like many others that day, they were called to duty. Senator Daniel Akaka, then an ROTC student at the Kamehameha School for Boys, grabbed a rifle and guarded the hills above the school from potential Japanese paratroopers. Senator Inouye, then a volunteer medical aide, reported to Lunalilo Elementary School where for a week he tended to the wounded. In the weeks that followed, the shipyard was back to work, repairing vessels raised from the harbor. Incredibly, all but 2 sunk battleships returned to service in just 2 years. The Nevada went on to support the invasion of Normandy. 5 other ships damaged at Pearl Harbor later met Japanese forces in the Philippines. That day of infamy and the events that followed would ultimately galvanize more than 12 million Americans to serve in uniform during the Second World War. We remember the men and women who left their homes to fight an enemy they did not know in places they had never heard of. They said goodbye to their families to protect their neighbors, foreclosed the promise of their own dreams to protect their freedom. We know well the stories of courage and devotion. The Tuskegee Airmen, the 442nd Infantry Regiment. We remember the ingenuity and heroism of Doolittle's Raiders, the Navajo Code Talkers, and the Nisei translators. The war in the Pacific lasted 2,194 days. When American occupation forces landed 4 years later at the end of the war, Japan was in ruins. But instead of turning our backs on the people of Japan, we extended a hand. We chose to turn an enemy into an ally. American occupiers immediately set out to transform Japan into a peaceful democracy, implementing land and economic reforms, improving working conditions, and granting women the right to vote. The United States sent billions of dollars in economic aid to rebuild Japan. Most of that assistance was delivered as food. For even several years later after the surrender, there was widespread starvation in Japan. It is hard to forget someone that sends you milk for hungry children, as Prime Minister Abe recently told Congress. The attack on Pearl Harbor set in motion a chain of events with painful consequences for the 2 countries. But the decision that we made to partner with rather than punish Japan helped to forge between our 2 countries what Senator Mike Mansfield described as the most important bilateral relationship in the world, bar none. Today, Japan is a leader in the Western world. We cooperate as partners to maintain regional peace. Our countries work together to stop the flow of extremism and arms in the Indian Ocean. We work side by side in humanitarian relief and to defend against ballistic missile threats. Our relationship has never been stronger. President Obama's trip in May to Hiroshima and Prime Minister Abe's upcoming trip this month to Pearl Harbor demonstrates the endurance of this friendship and the importance of reconciliation. And so as we commemorate the 75th anniversary of the attack on Pearl Harbor, we remember the service and sacrifice of the men and women who lost their lives on that day in December. And in remembering them in the service of those who fought, we know that their sacrifices were not in vain. America and Japan are forever joined in history. We move forward together in the memory of those who sacrificed for a better world and for peace. Madam President, I yield the floor.